Welcome to the world united. Welcome to the world united.
Our speaker is Dr. Glenn. Let me introduce Dr. Dr. Glenn is a president of the World Constitution and Parliament Association, WCPA, also the Earth Constitution org. He's the president of the Earth Constitution Institute, ECI, president of the Provisional World Parliament, PWP, professor of philosophy and chair emeritus peace studies, Radford University. Research interests, his scholarly interest and passion continues in the same path that was articulated in his book in 2005 called The Millennium Dawn, The Philosophy of Planetary Crisis and Human Liberation. Dr. Glenn received the Gusi International Peace Prize at internationally broadcast ceremonies via satellite in Manila, Philippines, November 27, 2013. The Peace Prize is in recognition of his global work on behalf of world peace with justice under the Earth Constitution. Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn. And your topic for today is the Earth Constitution is the gold standard for raising human spirituality to the next level. Excited to listen to you. Over to you, Doctor. Please unmute on Dr. Martin. Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? I very much appreciate being here in the World Parliament on Spirituality. It's been a pleasure to listen to the various speakers and so on. I want to, before I begin talking about the Earth Constitution as a gold standard, I just want to put things in a little bit of a larger framework, a larger context, and go back to what scientists now tell us is the beginning of the world in the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago. There are many scientists who have developed what is known as the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle means that they have discovered that consciousness, human consciousness, was implicit in the structure of the universe from the first moment of that Big Bang. That the universe, in a very real way, has come to reality, come to self-consciousness in us. That this entire process, 13.7 billion years on Earth, then it became the process of life and the evolution of life. 3.6 billion years of life, and life developed from one cell to multi-celled to mammals to pre-humans called hominids, and then finally to human beings. So there's a very real truth in what thinkers like Sri Aurobindo have said, that human self-awareness is the universe come to consciousness of itself in us. We didn't create our own self-awareness, but we know that we're an evolving creature and that we have evolved out of this oneness of nature into self-consciousness. But this was implicit in the universe from the very beginning. And it isn't just Eastern thinkers like Sri Aurobindo. Western thinkers like Professor Harold E. Harris, rationalist philosopher, say the same thing. Why is this important? Because the consciousness that each of us has as an individual may be covering up something that's much more fundamental. And I think this theme of a more fundamental consciousness has been there in many of the people who have spoken in this Parliament of Spirituality, right? The more fundamental consciousness is universal. It has to do with the coming to consciousness of something that's not connected with my little ego, my preference for this kind of ice cream or that, my political affiliations or whatever. It's something truly universal. And thinkers have articulated the development of human consciousness out of that primal oneness only very recently. A standard category is that we first began to be aware. Signs of human self-awareness began in the so-called age of magic, 15 to 25, 35, 40,000 years ago. And this is evidenced in those cave paintings that all of us have seen, and that I actually have visited some of these caves where these cave paintings have taken place. And then after the discovery of agriculture, where human beings no longer had to be nomadic, moving from one place to another, we discovered that we could bring our food to ourselves and build permanent, elaborate civilizations. And we entered what scholars call the age of mythology, a mythological consciousness, which is very different than the consciousness that you and I now share. Our consciousness it came about, many of these scholars say, during the famous axial period of human history, which took place between the 2nd and the 8th century before the Common Era, when the leaders and the thinkers and the philosophers of all the today's great world religions came about, all of them criticizing the mythological point of view, all of them in exhibiting a new consciousness in which subject and object now can be separated, and we no longer deify the world. The sun is no longer a god, the moon no longer a goddess, but now the ground of being is projected beyond the world. Buddha, nature, or Brahman, or the creator God of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So we became capable of thinking in terms of the ground of being. And it is in terms of what I was just saying recently, it may be that the ground of being is becoming conscious of itself through us, in us. So our consciousness has continued to evolve from that axial period down to the present. And there are many thinkers today who are saying that we're now in a second axial period, the second transformation of consciousness, in which our consciousness expands from being individualized, being rationalized, subject-object, to being globalized, a global consciousness. And I think many of the speakers in this parliament have indicated something like that. We're moving to a global consciousness. But we have, in the recent centuries, human beings under the rational consciousness discovered the essential methodology of science. They discovered this in the 17th century with the Copernican revolution, with Galileo, with Francis Bacon, and culminating in the work of Sir Isaac Newton. And that discovery led to a paradigm, a worldview, which thinkers today agree was fundamentally mistaken. Right? It was a worldview coming out of Newton's synthesis of the work of these thinkers, a worldview that culminated in the 18th century, which saw the universe as atomistic, as mechanistic, as causally determined, as a collection of bodies in motion related to one another in external relationships. One body hits another, and it causes an impact, a causal impact, and so on. In this worldview, there was no place for the human mind, no credible place. They couldn't explain the human mind. In this worldview, the world was fragmented into atomistic, machine-like entities. Well, out of this worldview, as we know today, came the dominant economic system and the dominant political system that now are there everywhere in the world. The economic system was global capitalism, a system based on human self-interest, where each individual atomistically conceived, or each corporation or business atomistically conceived, engaged in competition, struggle with other corporations or individuals for maximizing wealth, for getting ahead, and so on. And so there's an atomism there, an atomism that is not universal harmony, it's not universal love, it's not the embracing of peoples in the principle of unity and diversity. It's fragmentation. It's a fragmentation. And the same thing happened with the system of sovereign nation states. Beginning in the year 1648, many scholars agree, with the Peace of Westphalia in Germany, nations agreed to have absolute borders and be sovereign, be autonomous over their internal affairs and completely independent from one another in their external affairs. So today we inherit this system, right? In the year 2020, 3 centuries after the world political system was founded, and 4 or 5 centuries after capitalism was founded, we are still dividing the world into some now 200 militarized sovereign fragments, all of whom have their foreign policy, many of them in competition with one another, invading one another, overthrowing one another, trying to subvert one another, economically, politically, militarily. So these 2 systems, the system of sovereign nation states and the system of profit-oriented, fragmented capitalism, are today blocking. They're interfering with the continued growth of human consciousness toward holism, toward integration, toward harmony. Right? This is our condition today. And this is why for a number of years now, since 1995, I have advocated the Constitution for the Federation of Earth, which in the introduction, I think of as the gold standard for human affairs. Because the Constitution joins human beings together under the principle of unity and diversity. It overcomes our fragmentation, not by obliterating diversity, but by unifying people so that diversity is now loved and respected and embraced by the sovereignty of the whole. Nations are not legitimately sovereign because that fragments the world into militarized power blocks. What is legitimately sovereign is the people of Earth. And capitalism is not a legitimate system unless the economics of trade and so on, is predicated on the common good of everybody, on everybody having enough food, clothing, and shelter, and not just absolute winners and losers, as is the case today, where 1 billion people on this planet live in horrible misery, and a very few people live in unspeakable wealth and power. What the Earth Constitution does, therefore, is replace these systems, brings them in. It doesn't abolish them. It brings them into a larger framework, right? The nations now enter into the Earth Constitution as the House of Nations. Each nation has 1, 2, or 3 representatives in the House of Nations, depending on its population. The people of Earth, now for the first time ever in human history, every person on Earth is represented in the House of Peoples. There's 1,000 electoral districts spanning the globe. In each of these districts, elects a delegate to the House of Peoples. So you have a House of Peoples representing the sovereignty of the people of Earth, a House of Nations representing the various nations and borders of the Earth. The nations are not abolished. And as Dr. Kotila mentioned before, the House of Councilors. There's a third house in the World Parliament in which special arrangements are made in order to get people into government, into the democratic world government, who are wise, who are highly educated, who represent the whole and the common good of the whole. So what the Earth Constitution does is bring us forward, right? Bring us forward into a political and economic holism, which allows us, will be a stepping stone beyond the fragmentation of humanity that now takes place because of global capitalism and because of the system of sovereign nation states, a fragmentation which is, as we all know, is resulted in weapons of mass destruction. It's resulted in endless wars, in endless spying, in assassinations and overthrow and competition. All of these things are blocking our ability to move to the next higher level, which is the level of spiritual holism, the level of unity and diversity, the level of peace, world love, and world solidarity. So that is why the Earth Constitution becomes the gold standard. Right now, someone earlier mentioned the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which in terms of goals, those 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals are quite excellent. Ending poverty, reducing CO2 emissions, empowering women, and so on. But the Sustainable Development Goals themselves are unattainable because the UN is an organization predicated on the system of militarized sovereign nation states. The UN does not have any authority to abolish the militarism of these states. It doesn't have any authority over any of the nations, so that world-class criminals, as Dr. Kotila mentioned, the world-class criminals who run some of these nations, who have invaded other nations and so on, they don't go to jail, right? They don't pay for their crimes. What they are is functionaries of a fragmented and disjointed world system that simply does not work. It simply does not work in political terms, in economic terms, nor does it work to allow further human spiritual development, to the principle of unity and diversity, to the principle of holism, to the principle of human solidarity and love. So that's why under the World Parliament, in the Earth Constitution, which has, as I described just now, a tricameral house, the three houses in the World Parliament. Under that parliament, there's a world judiciary, right? Everywhere on the planet, there'll be the Constitution for the Federation of Earth will be represented by a world judiciary, world judges. There's a world administration. Very important that this world administration is non-military, because the entire Constitution is non-military, right? A world administration that has no police powers, no power to suspend the Constitution. Its job is to implement the budget and the law and the directives given to it by the World Parliament. Right? And then under the World Parliament, there's a third house, a third agency, Civilian World Police, right? And the attorney generals that work with them to enforce world law. Civilian World Police will have only weapons necessary to apprehend individuals. No bombs, no jet planes, no cruise missiles, nothing connected with war, right? Because it's only individuals who violate the law. And so you can see, I think, that this the Earth Constitution brings us to a new paradigm where people themselves, individuals around the world, are responsible to the law, but this criminal system where war, mechanized destruction of some designated population, this criminal system has been ended and superseded by the Constitution, which actually is written and embodies a higher spiritual level than the sovereign nations and global capitalism. So finally, I just want to mention one more agency that's under the World Parliament. The fourth agency under the World Parliament is the World Ombudsman. It is a worldwide agency created by the Constitution, which is dedicated to serving as a watchdog on the government itself, a watchdog for protecting and promoting human rights vis-a-vis the world police, vis-a-vis the courts, vis-a-vis the parliament. It is an agency that embodies the solidarity of universal love and universal human rights, bringing them all together under this new order for the earth. Right? And this new order for the earth is not the domination of the earth by the rich, right? They're no longer possible for them. It's not the domination by powerful nations now. All of that, the nations will be disarmed under the Constitution, no more military. It's now the sovereignty and unity and solidarity of the people of earth themselves. So I recommend, if you haven't already looked at it, that you go to our website, which is www.earthconstitution.world. That's earthconstitution.world. And you can read the Constitution there. You can order, and you can see about our work there. We have chapters around the world. We have people at the grassroots level who are working to embody this. We're working on digital blockchain secure voting systems so that the 1,000 electoral districts will be able to develop actual secure voting, and we'll begin to be able to elect directly a world parliament, right? Building the new world, building the new paradigm inside the shell of the old paradigm, which is now rapidly crumbling. So again, I want to go back to what I started out with today, that there's, we're embraced by the universe. The universe seems to have come into self-consciousness in us. There's something in us that needs to be actualizing whatever is fundamental in the universe, which is goodness, which is love, which is interdependence, which is solidarity, which is a spiritual unity that the world now lacks, that is blocked by the present structures of the world, in which the Earth Constitution not only embodies, but makes possible for humanity. So I'll stop there, and I say, tell you all how much I appreciate this wonderful conference, and thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn. Indeed, an amazing inputs about the Earth Constitution, and we're so honored to have you here. Thank you so much. This is a small token of our appreciation. The World United proudly presents Dr. Glenn for being an esteemed presenter in the 3rd edition of the World Parliament on Spirituality 2020 North America. Thank you so much. A lot of value today, Doctor.
Thank you.